Hello everyone, this is Jason from Primetime Aquatics, and in this video we're going to be talking about something that's a little bit controversial, and that is whether or not wild-caught fish should be in the hobby. We're covering it here because a while back I did a video, a fish room tour of freshwater exotics, and they primarily sell wild-caught fish. And a lot of people had comments and concerns around wild-caught fish, and so in this video we're going to be talking about some of the pros and cons of wild-caught fish in the freshwater hobby, so stay tuned. Now, one thing I do want to mention, I would love to hear from you in the comments section below how you feel about wild-caught fish. The only thing I ask is from the Primetime Aquatics community, let's keep the comments respectful. It's one of the things I've always appreciated about us in the Primetime Aquatics communities, where we can have discussions and even sometimes disagreements. We state the opinions, but we don't get personal about it. So I hope that that will remain the case in the comments section below if you have an opinion. So what I'd like to do first is I'd like to talk about some of the potential concerns when it comes to wild-caught fish. One of the main comments that we saw in the video when we did the freshwater exotics tour, and I'll put that in the upper right-hand corner as well as in the description below if you want to check that out, people were worried about the fish and their health. And that is a valid concern. When we think about the fish, they're going from a wild environment, they're being shipped, and that's going to cause stress. And then eventually they're being put in a fish tank, and all of those things can cause stress. Some of the comments centered around, well, the fish aren't going to be happy once they were in the wild and now moving to a fish tank. The one thing I think we have to be very careful about is anthropomorphizing fish. What does that mean? It means attributing human characteristics to things that are not inherently human. Fish do not have the same cognitive abilities that we have. And so we just have to be careful when we talk about fish that might be depressed, or they feel bad because now they're in a tank, or they don't get to do the things they used to do. And while it's true that the fish are going to be confined compared to a wild type environment, it has not been shown that fish have the same feelings that we humans have. Now, obviously, another big concern when it comes to wild-caught fish is the environmental component. We need to set a foundation here from the start. We are assuming that wild-caught fish are being managed and they are being done so sustainably. Obviously, if the environment is being heavily exploited to catch these fish, that is a big-time problem. Now, when we say the fish are being harvested sustainably, what we're saying is that the fish that we are removing from the environment can be naturally replaced and the populations can be maintained. All right, so let's talk about some of these other issues when it comes to wild-caught fish. Wild-caught fish may be harboring internal or external parasites that they've learned to live with over time. You introduce these wild-caught fish to your fish tank, and now those internal or external parasites might come into contact with your fish that have been captively bred. They may be more susceptible to disease because of that. The other thing you have to think about when it comes to wild-caught fish are water parameters. Often, not always, but often wild-caught fish are going to be more sensitive to changes in water parameters, things like pH and water hardness, temperature. So it's more necessary often to match the wild conditions, the natural conditions of these fish when they're coming from the wild compared to those fish that are captively bred. Beyond that, you have to think about things like light. Often, I'm thinking more here of like fish from South America, Central America, maybe fish that are in black water environments. Often the light that we have on our fish tanks is going to exceed that of what we would normally find in nature, so that could introduce some stress. There is stress just when you've got people moving in front of a fish tank. Their wild-caught fish are not going to be used to that perspective. Other inhabitants in the tank may not be endemic fish, and so there could be some issues there with bullying or just fish that aren't normally found with one another. Maybe you've got some really active fish in the tank and you're bringing in wild-caught fish that are less active. That could also increase stress and reduce the likelihood of their survival. Wild-caught fish may be more finicky when it comes to the food that we're feeding. If they've been in the wild and they're used to eating insects or smaller fish, and now we bring them into an aquarium and we're trying to feed them pellets or flake food, they may not take readily to those foods. And so it's something that we have to keep in consideration, is that we may have to introduce a specialized diet for some of our wild-caught fish. All right, so when we're looking at the cons of keeping wild-caught fish, obviously the reoccurring theme here is stress. Stress from the capture of the fish, to the transport of the fish, to trying to match the water parameters, to trying to match their food. If we can minimize that, we can do a lot in ensuring that the wild-caught fish are happy and healthy in our home aquarium. So with all of those potential drawbacks, why keep wild-caught fish? Well, I think the most obvious reason is that there are people who keep fish that want something different. Maybe something that can't be bred commercially, and they want to go out and have something different in their fish tanks. Now at first this sounds kind of selfish, and it can be, but what we have to consider is that by keeping fish from the wild, that increases the likelihood that we can potentially learn more about these fish, learn more about their breeding habits, and potentially shift from having to catch them in the wild to breeding them commercially, and then we're not impacting the wild as much in the future. The other thing that might be a potential benefit, and it kind of mirrors the concept of having a zoo or a public aquarium, the more people engage with these animals, the more they're going to care about them, even if they don't exist in their natural habitat. Of course, once you bring them in and you start breeding them, that creates interest, and that's a good thing. I think about the Goodeids. We did a fish room tour, I'll put it in the upper right-hand corner, of Andrew Pierkowski's fish room. He is a Goodeid expert. He got interested in Goodeids because he was able to keep them. A lot of these fish are either extinct in the wild or threatened or critically endangered. And he and a number of his colleagues are breeding these fish all around the world and creating great interest in these fish. Again, I would highly recommend check out that video in the description below. It's a really cool fish room tour. But it's gotten to the point where a lot of these fish, they're gone. They're extinct in the wild due to destruction of their environment. Well, we still have some of these fish in collectors' hands, in breeders' hands, and hopefully at some point we may be able to reintroduce some of these fish into their natural habitat. Another reason why you might want to consider wild-caught fish is genetic diversity. If we've been breeding fish in captivity for extended periods of time, certain genetic mutations can accumulate. The introduction of new genes from wild-caught fish may help alleviate that issue. Now, some people think that wild-caught fish are better off in their natural environment, and that really depends on how you define that. Often, fish kept in captivity will live longer than those fish that are kept in the wild. If we think about this logically, they don't have the same competition for food. We're feeding them a steady diet every day. Water parameters, if we're doing our job in a closed system in an aquarium, are relatively steady. We're reducing the likelihood that they encounter internal and external parasites. And over time, hopefully we are reducing their stress level. All of those things can lead to an extended lifespan. There is a common misconception that if we didn't catch fish out of the wild, those environments would be healthier and more stable and overall better. We have to remember that people who catch fish and sell them are doing so to earn a living for themselves and potentially for their family. The other industries that are available are often even more destructive. So things like mining, agriculture, keeping livestock, all of those things result in the destruction of rainforests, the destruction of land. A lot of times that creates a lot of runoff in rivers and streams, and that doesn't just hurt the fish that we would normally keep in the industry, it hurts all the fish endemic to those areas. Of course, the idea is if you have people who are fully invested in the industry and catching wild-caught fish sustainably, they will do a better job of protecting those areas. So again, I wanted to put this video out because we got a lot of comments in the freshwater exotics video. I'd love to hear from you in the comments section below. What are your thoughts on wild-caught fish? Have you kept them before? Have you not? Would you keep them? Or do you think that maybe you'd want to go in a different direction? If you found this video useful, share, subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.